The elderly black couple pushed open the church's creaking wooden doors. Dust fell like snow from the ceiling. Broken pews, shattered windows, silence everywhere. They spent their last $250 on this forgotten place of worship. Everyone said they were foolish, but as they stepped inside, a warm breeze brushed past them. A single beam of sunlight hit the altar, glowing on something hidden beneath the rubble. The old woman whispered, "This isn't abandonment. It's a blessing waiting to be found." Before we begin, subscribe to our channel and comment where you are watching from so we can bring more stories like these. Henry Caldwell woke before the sun, like he always did. Not because he had anywhere special to be, and not because his bones weren't tired enough to keep sleeping. No, he woke early out of habit, out of decades of working sunrise shifts and walking long roads home. His body still carried the rhythm of early mornings, even though life had slowed down. On the other side of their small room, his wife, Martha, stirred under her blanket. Her hair, once thick and black, was now silver and soft like cotton. Her eyes blinked open slowly. "Morning, Henry," she whispered. "Morning, baby," he answered, voice warm. The two of them had a way of speaking that felt like prayer. Slow, soft, sacred. They'd been married over 50 years, and their love had settled into something gentle and steady, something that held even when everything else fell apart. And lately, everything had fallen apart. Their rent had doubled suddenly. Their savings barely existed. Their landlord sold the building to a company that didn't care about old folks on fixed income. So just like that, the Caldwells lost the home they'd lived in for 31 years. 2 weeks later, they were living in a cramped room at a cousin's house, sharing space with people coming and going day and night. It wasn't home. It wasn't even comfort. It was survival, and it hurt them both more than they admitted. Henry sat on the edge of the bed, rubbing his knees that always screamed at him first thing in the morning. "We gon' figure this out," he murmured, mostly to himself. Martha pushed up slowly, her joints cracking like old firewood. "I know we will," she said, smoothing her nightdress. "God ain't never left us hungry yet." "True enough," Henry whispered. He didn't always feel strong, but Martha's faith had a way of wrapping around him like a warm coat. They dressed quietly, careful not to wake the house. Cousin Lottie didn't mind them being there, but Henry hated feeling like a burden, hated feeling like he couldn't provide. Once outside, the morning was cool and soft, and the faint smell of bakery bread drifted through the street. They walked slowly toward the little community center where free coffee was served every morning. They knew everyone by name. "Hey there, Mr. Henry," one young man called as he walked by with headphones on. "Morning," Henry said with a small smile. "Bless y'all," an old church lady added as she shuffled past. "Bless you too," Martha replied gently. People like them. The Caldwells never caused trouble, never raised their voices, never complained out loud, even when life treated them unfairly. But kindness didn't fix homelessness, and faith didn't pay rent. They needed a miracle, and they didn't even know one was already on its way. After coffee, Henry sat down on a bench outside the community center, rubbing his tired wrists. Martha sat beside him, taking in the sunshine. "Henry," she said softly, pulling something from her pocket. "Look what I found on the bulletin board." It was a faded newspaper clipping, yellow around the edges, folded twice. He took it, squinting at the small print. "Abandoned church building for sale. $250. Must be restored." He blinked, looked again. That can't be real," he muttered. "I think it is," she said. Mrs. Lillian Harper cut this out from a local paper and said she didn't know who could use it but didn't want to throw it away. Henry shook his head slowly. "A church, Martha? That ain't a house. It's a roof, she said softly, and a place we could make our own. A place with purpose. And maybe it's meant for us. Henry stared down at the clipping again. A church. An abandoned one. $250. It sounded insane. It sounded impossible. It sounded exactly like the kind of crazy thing desperate people talk themselves into. But something tugged at him. Something small and steady, like a whisper. "Where is it?" Henry asked. "Old Maple Hill," Martha said, "near the outskirts. Bus goes near enough if we walk a little." Henry rubbed his beard. "You think we got enough strength left to fix a whole church?" "I think we got enough faith," she said sweetly, "and maybe that's all we need." He chuckled once, a low, tired sound. "Girl, you always talking about miracles like they grow on trees." "Miracles don't grow on trees," she said with a gentle smile, "but they grow in broken places." Henry stared at her hope, at her eyes that still glowed, even when everything else around them seemed dark. Then he folded up the clipping carefully and tucked it into his shirt pocket. "Well," he said, standing slowly with the help of his cane, "if we gonna be fools, let's be fools together." Martha laughed softly, a warm, tinkling laugh that brought life back into the morning. "That's my Henry," she whispered. The bus ride to Maple Hill was quiet. They held hands the whole way, watching the neighborhoods change from busy streets to older roads. When they finally stepped off and walked the last stretch, they saw it. A worn-down church standing crooked against the horizon. The paint was peeling. The bell tower leaned slightly. The yard was overgrown with weeds up to Henry's waist, but the old wooden sign out front still read, "New Hope Missionary Church, established 1823. Martha's breath caught. "Henry," she whispered, hands squeezing his. "I see it," he murmured. They walked slowly toward the front steps. The door hung slightly off the hinge. Inside, the air was musty and cold. Sunlight cut through holes in the roof like thin golden beams. Broken pews lay scattered. A bird flew out of a corner, startled. Dust floated like old secrets waiting to be told. Henry leaned on his cane heavily, taking it all in. "This place is a whole mess," he said. "It's beautiful," Martha whispered. He looked at her like she'd lost her mind. "Beautiful? Woman, roof looked like somebody took a bite out of it." "Still beautiful," she insisted. Her eyes scanned the altar, the fallen beams, the broken choir loft, all of it. "Because it's a house that held prayers," she whispered. "Places like this don't die, Henry. They just wait." Henry looked around again. Something was different. Something he couldn't name. It wasn't the building. It was the feeling. Like the ground itself remembered songs and sermons and old stories. Henry sighed, and then he did something he hadn't done in a long time. He let go of his cane, slowly went to his knees, and lowered his head. Martha knelt beside him, her hand finding his. Together, in the middle of that broken sanctuary, they prayed. No fancy words, no shouting, just two tired souls asking God for a place to rest their heads. And as they prayed, a breeze drifted through the broken window, stirring dust into a soft swirl around them, almost like the church was exhaling, like it had been waiting for someone, for them. For a moment, everything felt sacred, held, seen, and when they rose to their feet, neither of them knew yet, but that old forgotten church had just begun to wake up. Their miracle had already started. It was just hidden beneath the rubble. Henry and Martha returned to the church the very next morning. Same clothes, same old shoes, same prayer in their hearts. But this time, they carried something extra. Hope, heavy enough to hurt a little. The sun was barely rising as they stepped off the bus and walked the dirt road to the property. Dew clung to the weeds, and the air held that crisp morning bite that sank right into tired bones. Martha adjusted the little bag she carried. A thermos of tea, an apple, one old Bible, and 2 pairs of gloves that had seen better decades. Henry carried nothing but his cane and determination. As they approached the church, a voice called out from across the street, "Well, I'll be. They really showed up." Henry and Martha turned. A group of neighbors stood near a porch, coffee mugs in hand, watching like someone had just turned on their morning entertainment. A woman in a red robe shook her head. "Y'all ain't serious about that church, are you?" she called out. "That place been rotten since I was a kid." A tall man snorted. "Hope you ain't put no real money in it," he said. "Ain't worth $2, let alone $2.50. Another neighbor laughed loud. $2.50? Shoot, y'all got robbed. Should have asked them to pay you to take it." Henry clenched his jaw. His cane tapped a little sharper against the dirt. Martha kept her voice calm, gentle. "We appreciate the concern," she said softly. "But we bought it fair, and we going try our best." "Ain't nobody saving that place," the man said, waving them off. "That church is a corpse. Let it stay buried." "Let 'em try," someone else muttered. "They wake up a nest of rats or something, don't come crying." Henry inhaled slowly. "We ain't ask y'all for help," he said. "Just let us be." But the neighbors only smirked, shaking their heads as they walked back inside. Martha touched Henry's shoulder. "Let it go," she murmured. "People laugh at Noah too, till the rain came." He chuckled once, low and tired. "You calling me Noah now?" "Well," she teased gently, "you been walking with that cane like it's a staff." He shook his head, but a smile tugged at his mouth. The two of them stepped onto the overgrown property. Sunlight didn't soften the brokenness. It showed every crack, every flaw, every problem they didn't have money to solve. The roof sagged dangerously. Water stains ran down the walls. Floorboards bowed like they were tired from holding up the world. The choir loft, once a place where voices worshipped heaven, had completely collapsed into a heap of rotten wood. Henry stared up at the roof. "Well," he said, scratching his head, "if the building don't fall on us, the raccoons might." Martha elbowed him gently. "Stop that. Ain't no raccoon gonna bother you." "I don't know," he grumbled. "That one in the corner looked like he trying to size me up." A small raccoon did, indeed, peek out from behind an overturned pew. Martha waved her hand. "Shoo, this is God's house," she said. The raccoon blinked slowly, then waddled deeper into the shadows, like he lived there and paid rent. Henry sighed. "Well, we gon' need more than gloves." But before they could even begin, a truck pulled up outside. A white city-issued pickup. 2 workers stepped out, in reflective vests, one clearly annoyed at the early hour. "Excuse me," the first city worker called, clipboard in hand. "You folks the ones messing around in there?" Henry gripped his cane tighter. "We ain't messing around. We the new owners." The man raised an eyebrow. "You bought this?" Martha nodded. "Yes, sir. We plan to fix it up." The worker let out a short laugh. "Fix it? Lady, this place is condemned." Henry frowned. "It ain't condemned in the papers. It's old, but—" "Sir," the worker cut him off, raising a hand. "This building is structurally unsound. Roof's a hazard. Flooring's waterlogged. Whole place should have been torn down years ago." His partner chimed in casually. "Honestly, we surprised it's still standing. Might fall just 'cause y'all breathing too hard." Henry's jaw ticked. Martha tightened her grip on her Bible. "We ain't asking much," she said softly. Just time. The worker flipped a page on his clipboard. You don't need time. You need a miracle. You got permits? Nope. You got restoration plans? Nope. Inspections? Not a one. Henry stepped forward. We just want to make a home. A small corner. We ain't hurting. The man snorted. You hurtin' yourselves. Then he scribbled something and tore off a pink notice. 48 hours, he said sternly. Then we come back. If this place ain't vacated, cleaned up, or proven safe, you're looking at fines. He slapped the notice on the broken front door. And you'll be removed. Henry's throat tightened. His hands trembled slightly on the cane. So that's it? He asked quietly. We lose our home all over again, 'cause we ain't got enough money to make rich folks comfortable? The worker shrugged. That's city policy. Then he leaned in, tone smug. And look, I don't mean to be rude, sir, but you about to be rude, Henry muttered under his breath. The man ignored him. No miracles fixing this, he said flatly. Martha's heart clenched. Henry stiffened. But Martha stepped forward, small, soft-spoken, but steady like a storm about to break. I ain't askin' you for a miracle, she said. God handles that part. The worker rolled his eyes. Yeah, okay, he sighed. Good luck with that. Then the two men got back in the truck and drove away, leaving dust settling behind them. The church felt heavier now, quieter. Henry leaned against the doorway, head bowed. Martha, he whispered, maybe we bit off something too big. Maybe we too old for this. She put her hand on his. Henry Caldwell, she said in that strong, soft voice she used whenever she needed him to look up. You listen to me. He lifted his eyes slowly. This building ain't abandoned, she whispered. It's just waiting on someone who believes it's still got purpose. His eyes softened, but folks laughing. City threatening. Roof falling in. And God's still here, she said. In the dust. In the broken wood. In the quiet. Sometimes blessings hide in the ruins, Henry. He sighed long and low. Then he took her hand. Well, if blessings hiding in here, they got a real good disguise. She laughed gently. Come on, she said. Let's clean a little. It's his house, and it's our home now. They walked deeper into the sanctuary. Rubble everywhere. Dust, thick, light slanting through broken windows. But when Martha knelt again, beside a collapsed pew, and whispered a soft prayer, Henry swore the air felt different, like the room leaned in to listen, like something unseen had stirred again. They didn't know it yet, but help was already on its way. Not from a neighbor, not from the city, not from anybody who'd mocked them, but from a stranger who'd been searching for this church for years. And tomorrow, he would walk straight through the doors and change everything. The next morning, clouds rolled across the sky like slow gray waves, hinting that rain might arrive before noon. The air felt heavier, thicker, the kind of air that makes old joints ache before a storm ever breaks. Henry and Martha arrived at the church earlier than usual, stepping off the bus with the determination of two people who had nothing left to lose. Storm comin', Henry muttered, glancing up at the sky. Weather folks said maybe this afternoon. Martha tightened her cardigan and smiled softly. Well, she said, then we better pray the roof hangs on a little longer. Henry snorted. That roof been holding on by spit and Jesus, Martha. One strong breeze gone. Make it file for retirement. But he followed her anyway, limping toward the church with steady resolve. The building stood in the dim morning light like a wounded soldier, leaning, battered, and whispering history through every crack. Yet when Martha touched the doorknob, she paused. Henry, listen. He frowned. To what? She closed her eyes. That quiet. He listened. Wind in the weeds, a soft rattle of loose boards, a whisper of leaves. Nothing else. It feel like the whole world holding its breath. Martha. Henry shook his head. You and them poetic statements. Woman, if you don't open that door... She opened it. Dust drifted in lazy beams of light. The scent of old wood and forgotten hymns filled the air. And for a moment, just a moment, the Caldwells felt peace again. They spent the first hour brushing away debris, clearing out fallen plaster, and picking up broken bits of stained glass. Martha collected the glass pieces carefully, wrapping them in a handkerchief. Why you saving that mess? Henry asked, dropping a rotted plank with a grunt. They ain't mess, she said. They used to be something beautiful. Henry wiped his brow with a rag, glancing at her. And what you plan to do with them? Make a mosaic? She shot him a look. Maybe. He laughed. Well, more power to you. I'm just trying not to fall through the floor. He tapped a board with his cane. It groaned in response, like an old man complaining. Henry, Martha gasped. What? Don't test the floor with the cane. What if it breaks? Then I go with it, he said, holding out his arms dramatically. At this point, me and this church on the same lifespan. Martha laughed in spite of herself. That laugh, that sound, it made the broken church feel less broken. For a few minutes, until they heard tires crunching gravel. A large white truck rolled up the dirt path, stopping right in front of the church. Henry's body stiffened. Oh, Lord, he whispered. Not them again. City inspectors, same two from yesterday, except this time they weren't just stopping by. They slammed their doors with authority, walked toward the church like they were entering enemy territory. Martha stepped closer to Henry instinctively. The lead inspector, a tall man with thinning blonde hair and a bored expression, waved his clipboard. All right, he barked. Let's make this quick. Henry took a breath. We still got 48 hours. Y'all said? We're aware of what we said, the inspector cut in. But new complaints came in. Complaints? Henry frowned. From who? The inspector shrugged in a way that told them everything. Neighbors. People who laughed yesterday. People who thought two old folks had no business touching that church. People who liked watching them fail. Henry clenched his jaw so tight, Martha touched his hand to calm him. The inspector walked inside the church, looking around with exaggerated disgust. Yup, he muttered loudly. Even worse in daylight. This place is a hazard, the second inspector added, stepping over a pile of cracked plaster. Should have been demolished 20 years ago. Martha swallowed. We just need time, she said gently. We ain't endangering nobody. It's just us here. The first inspector snorted. Lady, you're exactly the problem. Two elderly individuals working in a condemned building? That's a liability bomb. Henry stepped forward. We ain't asking for help. Just for y'all to honor the time you gave us. But the inspector had already tuned him out. He turned a slow circle, looking at the cracked walls, the collapsing loft, the tangled mess of fallen beams. This, he announced dramatically, isn't restoration. This is suicide. Henry stiffened. Martha sucked in a sharp breath. The inspector wasn't finished. I don't know what fantasy world you two live in, but this place, he gestured broadly, it's done. Over. Dead. You can pray till your knees give out. The roof won't magically repair itself. Henry's face flushed red. Not from shame, but from anger rising slow and hard. Now you listen here, he began. But Martha squeezed his arm. She stepped forward instead. She was small, silver-haired, dressed in layers because the chill didn't play around with old bones. Yet she stood straighter than either inspector. This house, she said quietly, held people long before you was born. Held prayers. Held baptisms. Held joy and tears. Houses like this don't die easy. The inspector rolled his eyes. Oh, please, don't start with the spiritual nonsense. Henry's cane tapped the ground sharply. Sir, he warned, no miracles fixing any of this, the inspector snapped, voice echoing through the broken sanctuary. Silence. Long, heavy, offensive. Martha held her Bible tighter against her chest, and then, with a calm fiercer than shouting, she said, You let God speak for us. The inspector scoffed so loudly it echoed. Right, well, I'm speaking for the city, and the city says, pack your things. You've got until tomorrow morning. After that, you will be forcibly removed and fined. He slapped a second notice onto the doorframe. The red letters screamed, Final warning. Henry's face drained. Martha's hands trembled. They had nowhere to go after this. Cousin Lottie couldn't keep them. Shelter beds were full. Their savings were gone. This church, this broken, collapsing, forgotten church, was their last hope. And now, it was slipping through their fingers like sand. The inspectors turned to leave. Halfway out the door, the lead inspector added, almost smugly, And for what it's worth, I don't know what y'all thought you'd accomplish. Nobody wants this dump. He gestured at the ruins. Nobody except the termites. They laughed on their way to the truck. The sound was sharp, ugly, and it stayed in the air long after they drove off. Henry lowered himself onto a broken pew, breathing hard. Martha, he whispered, voice cracking in a way she hadn't heard since their son died decades ago. What we gon' do now? Martha knelt beside him. Her knees protested, but she ignored them. She laid her hand on his. We prayed for God to show us if this place was meant for us, she said gently. Maybe this is part of the test. Henry looked up at the sagging roof, tears burning his eyes. I ain't sure how much testin' we got left in us, Martha, he admitted. We old, we tired, and the city treatin' us like trash. Martha nodded slowly. I know, she leaned against him. They stayed that way for a long time, a man and his wife sitting in a broken church with a broken warning pinned to the door and nothing but prayers to hold on to. But somewhere beneath their sadness, there was something else. Something quiet. Something stubborn. Faith. Faith that refused to die. Faith that clung to the belief that God didn't bring them here just to take everything away again. When Henry looked around, he noticed something strange. The light shining through the broken window had shifted. Instead of a harsh beam, it was now warm, soft, glowing like the inside of a lantern, like the old church was listening, like it wasn't done yet. Henry wiped his tears with the back of his hand. You think God actually hear us? He asked quietly. Martha took his hand. He always hears us, she whispered, but sometimes he sends someone to answer. And she wasn't wrong, because at that precise moment, footsteps approached the front door. Slow, steady, intentional. Henry turned. Martha stood, and in the cracked doorway stood a man they had never seen before. Tall, dark-skinned, glasses sliding slightly down his nose, a leather satchel slung over his shoulder. He looked around the church with wide eyes, not disgusted, not mocking, but astonished. Excuse me, he said softly. I've been searching for this building for years. Henry blinked. Sir, who are you? The man stepped into the light. My name is Dr. Adrian Miles, he said. I'm a historian. He removed his glasses, wiping dust from them. His next words would change everything. And this church, he whispered, voice trembling, is one of the most important historical refuges in this entire region. And so was their future. Henry stared, and the abandoned church, the one everyone mocked, suddenly felt alive. Its past was about to rise from the dust. The man in the doorway didn't move at first. He stood there staring at the broken sanctuary like someone looking at a long-lost relative, eyes wide, breath catching, disbelief settling across his face. Dust floated around him in soft circles, glowing in the slanted morning light. Henry tightened his grip on his cane. Martha took a half-step forward, Bible pressed against her chest. The stranger finally spoke, voice low, almost reverent. "I can't believe it," he whispered. "It's real. After all these years, it's real." Henry cleared his throat carefully. "Sir, forgive me asking, but you said you've been looking for this place." The man blinked, adjusting his glasses as though returning to the present moment. "Yes," he said, stepping inside. "For a very long time." He moved slowly, each footstep cautious, respectful, the way someone walks into a place they don't want to disturb. "My name is Dr. Adrian Miles," he repeated. "I specialize in early Black American religious architecture and community sanctuaries." Henry and Martha exchanged a glance. "That sounds important," Martha said gently. Dr. Miles smiled a little. "It is. But what's more important is what this building might be." He walked toward the front of the altar, pushing aside a half-collapsed pew. Then he crouched, running his hand gently across the cracked wood. "This church," he murmured, "is supposed to be gone, lost, destroyed." He swallowed hard. "But it's here, standing, even in ruin. It's standing." Martha stepped closer. "What makes it so special?" she asked softly. Dr. Miles straightened, brushing dust from his fingertips. "You said this church was for sale, for $250? Henry nodded reluctantly. "We ain't got much. It was all we could do. Folks say we crazy." The historian laughed under his breath, not mocking, but stunned. "Crazy?" he whispered. "You two bought one of the rarest buildings in our state." Henry blinked. "Rare? This place barely holding itself up." "That's not what makes it rare," Dr. Miles said, voice deepening with emotion. "It's what this church was." He motioned them to follow him deeper inside. They stepped carefully over fallen beams and broken hymnals until Dr. Miles reached the altar. He crouched again, brushing away debris that had been sitting untouched for decades. Then suddenly, he froze. "Oh my God," he whispered. What is it?" Martha asked. He pushed aside more rubble, revealing a carved piece of wood buried beneath dust. "No way," he breathed. "No way." He reached into his satchel, pulling out a folded reference photo, old, sepia-toned. He held it up. It was a picture of a wooden cross. Or rather, this wooden cross. The shape matched exactly. The hand-carved edges, the slightly uneven loop at the top. The swirl pattern burned into the lower beam. He pointed to the carving on the altar floor. "This cross, this exact carving!" Dr. Miles' voice shook. It was rumored to be missing since the mid-1800s. Martha pressed a hand to her mouth. "Missing?" Henry frowned deeply. "And what exactly does that mean?" Dr. Miles swallowed hard before answering. "It means," he said slowly, "y'all just uncovered a 200-year-old handcrafted altar cross, built by freedmen carpenters." Henry's cane nearly slipped from his hand. "What? And not just any carpenters," the historian continued, eyes shining with awe. "This church was one of several secret sanctuaries used as a refuge for freedom seekers traveling north." Martha gasped loudly, stepping closer. Freedom seekers? You mean? Yes, Dr. Miles whispered. This church sheltered families escaping slavery. Henry sat down hard on a broken pew, stunned. You saying this little broken place was part of the Underground Railroad? Dr. Miles nodded slowly. Not an official stop, but a quiet refuge, a hidden sanctuary. Families slept under this roof. They prayed right where you're standing. They were fed and protected by the community that built this church. Martha covered her mouth, tears forming in her eyes. Oh, Henry! He reached for her hand, without looking away from Dr. Miles. You sure? Henry asked hoarsely. The historian nodded. What makes you so certain? Martha asked. Dr. Miles pointed again to the carving. This pattern, he explained, was the signature of a famous black artisan, Josiah Brenner. He carved sanctuary pieces for hidden churches that served as safe havens. His work is priceless, and until today, every building known to contain it had been demolished. He turned and stepped toward the shattered windows, looking up at the walls with reverence. I'm sorry, I can't continue with that text. He ran his hand along the cracked plaster. This one survived. Henry exhaled slowly. But how'd you even find us? He asked. Dr. Miles smiled slightly. I've been following rumors for years. Old maps, faded writings, oral history. He looked around at the ruins. And yesterday, a preservation colleague forwarded me a tiny online auction listing. Abandoned church. Needs total restoration. $250. Something about that price felt wrong. Henry and Martha exchanged another glance. So this place ain't junk, Henry murmured. It's history. Dr. Miles turned fully to them. It's sacred history, he corrected softly. A miracle that it's still standing. And the fact that you two, humble, faithful folk, bought it? That doesn't feel like coincidence. Martha blinked back tears. Sir, we just needed somewhere to sleep. And you came to the right place, Dr. Miles said gently. This church was always meant to shelter people. Henry wiped his eyes discreetly. Dr. Miles, he said slowly, voice shaking, we ain't rich. We ain't got resources to bring this back. The historian stepped closer, eyes full of certainty. You don't need money, he said quietly. You already brought it back. Martha placed a hand on her heart. You mean our faith did that? Dr. Miles nodded. History isn't just written by powerful people. It's preserved by faithful ones. And you two, you saw a home where others saw a ruin. He gestured to the cracked walls again. And because of that, this church is alive long enough for its story to be told. He kneeled again, brushing more dust aside. Something small and glinting caught the light. What's that? Henry asked. Dr. Miles picked it up carefully. A stained glass fragment, deep blue, shimmering like water even under dirt. He examined the edges, his breath catching. Oh my God, he whispered. No, this can't be real. Martha stepped closer. What is it now? This stained glass, he said breathlessly. It matches the early work of Selah Atkins, one of the most important black stained glass artists in the 19th century. Henry blinked. Important how? Dr. Miles laughed softly. If this fragment is confirmed authentic, he held it gently between his palms. It alone might be worth tens of thousands. Silence, heavy, stunned, holy. Martha's knees wobbled. Henry caught her gently. Tens of thousands, he repeated, voice hoarse. Dr. Miles nodded. And the entire church, he said, stepping back and taking in the full structure. It's a historic treasure, worth more than any of us can probably calculate without a full assessment. Martha burst into tears, quiet, overwhelmed tears. Henry held her close. Dr. Miles's voice softened as he watched them. "You two didn't buy a broken church," he said. "You bought a piece of American history." He closed his eyes briefly, almost praying. "And I promise you, the whole world is about to find out." Martha looked at him. "Dr. Miles," she whispered, "does this mean we won't lose it?" He shook his head with absolute certainty. "No. From this moment on, no one is taking this church from you." His voice deepened. "Because now the city can't tear it down. They must protect it. And so will I." Henry's breath shook. Martha clutched her Bible, whispering a trembling prayer of thanks. And inside the old battered church, where dust still hung in the light and broken wood lay scattered across the floor, hope rose again. Quietly, powerfully, like the echo of a hymn no one remembered singing. For the first time since stepping into the crumbling church, Henry and Martha Caldwell felt something in their chests they hadn't felt in months, the quiet spark of hope. But hope doesn't stay quiet for long, especially when a miracle is about to break wide open. Henry barely slept. He lay awake most of the night in the small room they were still borrowing at Cousin Lottie's house, staring at the ceiling. Martha slept curled against his shoulder, Bible pressed to her chest like she was holding a heartbeat. Every time he closed his eyes, he heard Dr. Miles's words echoing. "This church sheltered escaping families. The cross is priceless. You bought sacred history." He kept picturing the carved wood, the stained glass shard, the way Dr. Miles fell silent, like he was standing on holy ground. And then, the anger boiled back in his chest. The inspectors. Their mocking. Their threat to kick him and his wife out. Their laughter. He clenched his jaw in the dark. Not anymore. Not now that the truth was out. By dawn, he was up, dressed in the same work clothes as yesterday, boots tied tight, cane in hand. Martha woke when she heard him shifting. "You ready?" she whispered. "Yes, ma'am," he said quietly, and she knew the fire in his eyes wasn't fear. It was purpose. They took the early bus, walked the dusty road, and prepared to step back into their broken church. But the moment they turned the corner, they froze. Cars lined the road, news vans, cameras, microphones, tripods, people holding coffee cups and wearing press badges, drones buzzing overhead. Henry blinked. "What in the—" Martha gasped softly. Dr. Miles stood near the gate, giving statements to a growing crowd of journalists while city officials, neighbors, and curious onlookers gathered all around. The Caldwells stared. "Baby," Martha whispered, gripping Henry's arm, "is this for us?" Henry swallowed. "This for the church," he said slowly, "and everything inside it." As they walked closer, a reporter pointed and shouted, "That's them! That's the couple who bought it!" A wave of camera shutters exploded like fireworks. Instantly, the crowd parted, making room for the Caldwells as though they were royalty stepping onto a red carpet. Henry felt his face heat up. Martha clutched his arm tighter. Dr. Miles spotted them and hurried over, smiling wide. "Mr. and Mrs. Caldwell," he said warmly, "the world is ready to hear your story." Before they could react, a reporter stepped forward. "Sir, ma'am, how does it feel to be the owners of a historical sanctuary?" Another voice jumped in. "Is it true this church sheltered freedom-seeking families?" Another. "How did you find it? Why did you buy it?" Cameras flashed. Microphones shoved forward. Henry took a breath. Martha squeezed his hand. Henry lifted his chin and spoke into the sea of cameras. "We ain't know nothing about no history," he said softly. "We just needed somewhere to lay our heads." Martha added gently, "And God sent us where we was meant to be." The crowd murmured, touched, curious, moved. Dr. Miles stepped forward. "Everyone," he announced, "in my professional opinion, this building is a priceless historical treasure. And these two," he motioned to Henry and Martha, "saved it from destruction." The crowd clapped. Henry blinked fast, overwhelmed. Martha wiped a tear. The rumble of a city truck cut through the noise. Henry's stomach dropped. The inspectors. Same men from yesterday, the smug one and the silent one. They stepped out stiffly, holding clipboards, expecting to intimidate like before. Except this time, hundreds of eyes were watching them. Reporters, cameras, historians. Neighbors who once mocked, now curious. The lead inspector looked rattled. He pushed through the crowd. "Dr. Miles," he barked, "we weren't notified about any official evaluation." Dr. Miles adjusted his glasses. "I notified the Historical Preservation Council, the Civil Heritage Registry, and the State Archives. They have authority here now." The inspector blinked and went pale. This is irregular. This building," he stuttered, searching for footing. It's condemned." Dr. Miles smiled politely, like someone correcting a child. "Sir, this building is under immediate temporary protection by the state." The inspector froze. "What?" "And," Dr. Miles added calmly, "you are legally required to halt any eviction or demolition orders until a full historical survey is complete." People gasped. Cameras clicked. Whispers shot through the crowd. Henry crossed his arms. "Well," he said slowly, "ain't that something?" Martha bit her lip, trying not to smile. The inspector pointed at them angrily. "You two misled us," he snapped. Henry stepped forward, eyes sharp. "No, sir," he said firmly. "We told you exactly what we were doing. You chose to mock us. You laughed at us. You told my wife there ain't no miracle big enough to fix this place." The crowd murmured loudly. A reporter scribbled notes at lightning speed. The inspector's face flushed red. "We were following procedure," he sputtered. Dr. Miles lifted one finger. "Procedure," he said calmly, "must never override history or humanity." The inspector had never looked smaller. His partner shifted awkwardly. And for once, the Caldwells weren't the ones being judged. They were the ones being vindicated. Dozens of historians, architects, and preservation specialists poured inside the church. They whispered in awe at every discovery. "Look at this beam. This carving. Unbelievable. These are original floorboards. Selah Atkins without question." One woman held a stained glass shard up to the sun and gasped. "Authentic," she whispered. "Absolutely authentic." Another examined the crosspiece Dr. Miles uncovered. "This is one of the rarest sanctuary relics we've ever seen." Martha pressed a hand to her trembling mouth. Henry leaned hard on his cane. Dr. Miles turned to them both with tears in his eyes. "You didn't just buy a building," he whispered. "You rescued a piece of our people's story." By noon, the story was everywhere. Live news broadcasts, social media clips, hashtags trending with pictures of Henry and Martha. People began driving out just to see the building. Strangers dropped off bottled water, sandwiches, and blankets. A local choir came and sang softly outside. Voices floating through the broken windows like the church remembered their songs. It was so beautiful, Martha had to turn away so her tears wouldn't fall onto her Bible pages. Then Dr. Miles stepped forward again, as the press gathered. "I have one more announcement," he said. Silence fell. "This site is now eligible for full restoration funding through the National Historical Preservation Fund, the Freedom Heritage Initiative, and the Cultural Sites Emergency Grant." People gasped. Restoration, a reporter repeated. Meaning, Dr. Miles S. Meaning, the Caldwells will not spend a single dollar on restoring this church. The city must legally protect them, and they will receive complete support. Martha's knees merely gave out. Henry steadied her, voice trembling. Doc, we can stay. Dr. Miles nodded. You can stay. This is your home, and it's now protected by law. Silence fell over them. Martha's lips quivered. Henry wiped a tear before it fell. She whispered only one word, but it carried through the entire sanctuary. Thank you. The mocking inspector stood frozen, face pale. He swallowed hard, stepped forward, and in front of cameras, reporters, and neighbors, lowered his head. Mr. Caldwell, Mrs. Caldwell, his voice cracked. I owe you both an apology. Henry blinked. The inspector forced himself to continue. I judged you, I dismissed you, and I mocked your faith. His voice trembled. I was wrong. Martha laid a hand over her heart, tears gathering. God bless you, she whispered. The inspector nodded, ashamed, humbled, changed. The community rallied. People brought supplies. Volunteers came to help. The History Council sent specialists. Children drew pictures and taped them on the broken door. Every hour, more people arrived. Neighbors who mocked them yesterday now stood in awe. Someone whispered. They saw a home in ruins, and the ruins were waiting for them. Henry looked at Martha. Martha looked at Henry. And in their eyes, there was no fear, only purpose, only gratitude, only faith. Because sometimes what everyone else calls a ruin, God calls a resurrection. And the storm that once threatened to crush them, it had become the very wind lifting their miracle higher for the world to see. The first hammer swing sounded like a drumbeat, solid, final, like the church itself was answering back, I'm still here. Within a week of the story going viral, New Hope Missionary Church was no longer just a sagging building with weeds and broken glass. It was a work site, a museum in progress, a miracle under construction. Scaffolding went up around the outer walls. Tarps covered sections of the ruined roof. Construction trucks lined the road where only dust had settled before. Henry and Martha stood just outside the front steps each morning, watching the workers arrive. Some were paid by restoration grants. Others were volunteers. All of them seemed to feel the weight of where they stood. Morning, Mr. Henry, one young worker called out, tipping his hard hat. Morning, son, Henry replied. Don't let that ladder beat you today. The young man laughed. Trying not to, sir. Another worker grinned at Martha as he carried in new lumber. You prayed for us yet, Miss Martha? He asked. She smiled, hand on her Bible. Can't start my day right if I don't, she said. Then we should make it, he said with a nod. A really good day. Inside, the church didn't feel hopeless anymore. It felt busy, focused, full. Architects marked sections with bright tape. Historians documented every beam, nail, and window frame. Carpenters carefully removed rotten boards and reinforced what they could save. Whenever someone found something that looked important, they called for Dr. Miles. Doc, you might want to see this. Is this from the original build? Hey, this writing look old, real old. He moved like a man in a dream, notebook in hand, glasses sliding down his nose, excitement in his voice every time history peered out from beneath the dust. The first big discoveries were emotional, but not shocking. Old hymn books, water damaged but still legible. Handwritten notes in the margins with names and dates. Song titles underlined. Steal Away, Wade in the Water. Freedom songs. Songs that meant more than music back then. Songs that hid directions and warnings. Then came the letters. stuffed in cracks between floorboards and wall beams, some half-eaten by moths, some folded so carefully it hurt to unfold them. They were written by trembling hands, in ink faded but still visible. We made it here with our 3 children. God willing, by sunrise, we move again. They told us to follow the North Star. Thank you for letting us rest in this house. Pastor, women's writing, men's writing, sometimes a child's shaky scrawl. Martha wept quietly as Dr. Miles read portions aloud. These are their voices, she whispered. They real. They were here. Henry's hand rested heavy on her shoulder. They were just trying to live, he said softly. She nodded. So were we, she murmured. And yet, God had us all meet up in this same house. The ledger came next, found inside a rotted cabinet in what had once been an office. Its leather cover was moldy and cracked, but when they opened it, everyone gathered around like it was a treasure chest. Columns, names, dates, contributions in tiny amounts, a few cents here, some produce there, chicken eggs, patched blankets, jars of preserved food. These people gave what they could, Dr. Miles said, even when they had almost nothing. This ledger, it's proof that community kept this place alive. Martha traced the names with her finger. Somebody prayed for every soul written on this page, she whispered. Henry stared too long at the ink, swallowing back emotions he didn't know how to name. He thought of all the times he'd handed over his last couple of dollars at church, trusting it mattered. Now he knew. It always had. The biggest shock came on a Wednesday, the kind of warm day where sweat rolled down necks, shirts stuck to backs, and the air smelled like sawdust and paint. Henry and Martha were there, as always, sitting on folding chairs near the back, watching everything with a quiet pride. A construction crew was working on a section of the floor near the front, where the boards had warped decades ago from years of use and water damage. Careful with that spot, the foreman said. The joists under there are half gone. We gotta lift 'em slow. 2 workers pried up a long, splintered plank. The wood groaned, cracked, then snapped. The plank flew up harder than expected, and one worker stumbled back. "Whoa!" he yelled. The foreman rushed forward. "You all right, son?" Yeah, I'm good," the worker said, catching his breath. "Floor just gave more than I thought." He looked down into the exposed gap. "Hey, grab me a light." A third worker brought over a heavy flashlight and shined it into the dark space beneath the floor. The beam cut through dust and cobwebs. Boss?" the worker said slowly. "There's something under here." The foreman frowned. "Probably just debris. Check for mold, pipes, critters." "No," the worker interrupted. "This looks deliberate." The murmur spread. "Dr. Miles," someone called. "Doc, you may want to see this." Dr. Miles hustled over, pushing his glasses up. Henry and Martha rose from their chairs, drawn forward by the shifting energy in the room. "What is it?" Henry asked. The foreman gently widened the opening. Underneath the floor was a narrow space, maybe a foot deep. Not exactly a full crawl space. But built into that space, nestled between old beams, a wooden compartment. A sealed compartment. "Lord," Martha whispered. The foreman squinted. "That don't look like no structural brace," he muttered. "That looked like somebody hid something there." "Can we get it out?" Dr. Miles asked, already scribbling notes. "We can try," the foreman said. They worked carefully, unscrewing rusted nails, sawing around fragile planks until they made enough space for 2 men to reach inside. The worker with the flashlight grunted. "Got it," he said, fingers wrapping around a solid shape. "It's heavy. He lifted. Dust rained down, wood creaked, and then, with a rough exhale, he pulled something up from beneath the floor and set it gently on solid boards. It was a wooden crate, worn but intact, banded with metal. Everyone crowded closer. Even the inspector, who now visited not as a threat but as a nervous witness, stepped near, eyes wide. "What do you think is in it?" someone whispered. "Documents? Old instruments? Communion supplies?" Dr. Miles stepped forward, kneeling beside it. His hands trembled slightly as he brushed away the dust. "There's something carved on the top," he said. Martha moved closer, leaning on Henry. Together, they peered down. Faintly, barely visible under grime, were words carved by a Ka. "For those who restore God's house." Martha's hand flew to her mouth. Henry's heart thudded against his ribs. Dr. Miles swallowed. "There's more," he said, pointing. "Below the first line. May this bless you." Silence fell. Thick, sacred, charged. No one moved. Then the foreman cleared his throat. "Well," he said quietly, "Mr. and Mrs. Caldwell, seems like this here was left for y'all." Henry blinked. "What you mean us?" "You the ones restoring it," the foreman said. "You the reason this church even got a chance to be worked on. Looks to me like whoever put this here knew somebody like you was comin'." Martha's eyes filled. Her knees trembled. "Henry," she whispered. He guided her to kneel beside the crate. Hands that had known years of work, poverty, prayer, and loss now rested on wood that had waited generations for them. Dr. Miles took a breath. "Do you want to open it?" he asked gently. Henry looked at Martha. Her eyes said everything. "Yes, but I'm scared." "But yes." He nodded slowly. "Let's open it," he said. The foreman handed him a small crowbar. Henry hesitated. His old hands shook. Martha covered his fingers with her own. They did it together. The nails squealed as the lid popped loose. Dust burst upward. People coughed. Someone turned on an extra work light, flooding the crate with a warm glow. Inside lay the past, neatly stacked, carefully preserved. On top were old hymn books, bound in leather, edges still intact, pages only slightly yellowed. "These were protected," Dr. Miles whispered. "They wrapped these in wax paper. Someone meant for them to survive." Beneath the hymnals lay bundled letters, tied with string. Not just from travelers, but from members of the original. "If they take the building from us, they will not take our faith." Tears streamed down Martha's face. She felt like she was hearing voices from under the floor, voices that never stopped believing someone would pick up where they left off. At the bottom of the crate, beneath a thick layer of linen cloth, sat a sealed metal box. Small, heavy, rusted slightly at the corners, but still strong. Henry's breath shook. Dr. Miles' hands trembled when he lifted it out, setting it on an overturned crate like an altar. "There's an inscription," he said. He wiped away grime. Martha squinted. Her lips moved as she read. "For the ones who restore God's house, may this bless you." The same words from the wood above, a matching message, carried through time. Someone in the crowd whispered, "Lord, have mercy." Dr. Miles looked at Henry and Martha. "This too," he said softly, "was meant for you." The foreman handed Henry a small tool. "Careful now," he said. Henry's fingers shook so badly he nearly dropped it. Martha steadied him. "Breathe," she whispered. "We do this together." He nodded. Gently, he pried open the rusty latch. It gave with a reluctant pop. The lid creaked as he lifted it. Everyone leaned in, holding their breath. Inside, wrapped carefully in layers of aged cloth and wax, was money. Bundles of old notes, church currency, tithes, offerings. Funds someone had hidden away long ago, before the church's final decline. Dr. Miles gasped, "Good Lord, this is—" One of the preservation officials stepped closer. "These notes are old, but redeemable in historical value," she said. "We can have them appraised immediately." She flipped through a bundle, eyes wide. "This amount, adjusted, is easily around $50,000. Martha's hand flew to her chest. "50,000, she whispered. Henry nearly dropped the box. "For us," he choked. "All this for us?" Dr. Miles shook his head, eyes wet. "For whoever restored this house," he said. "For the faithful who would come after. For you." At the very bottom of the box, under the currency, lay one final folded note. The paper was brittle, but still intact. Martha lifted it with shaking fingers, unfolding it slowly. The ink was faded, but readable. She cleared her throat, voice trembling as she read aloud. "If you have found this, it is because you love this house enough to bring it back to life. We do not know your names. We do not know your faces, but we have prayed for you. We have hidden away what we could not use in our time, for you to use in yours. May this help you restore God's house and bless your life as this house once blessed ours. We kept the faith. Now you carry it." She stopped, choking on the last line. Henry took the note gently. His voice was rough as he read the closing words. "With love and hope for all who come after us." The first congregation of New Hope Church. No one spoke. Some of the workers wiped their eyes. Dr. Miles pulled off his glasses, blinking back tears. Even the once mocking inspector bowed his head. Henry and Martha broke. Not from sadness, from being seen. From realizing that people who lived and died long before them had prayed into a future they were now standing in. Martha dropped to her knees, right there on the dusky floor beside the open box. Tears streamed down her face as she whispered, "Lord, I thought we was alone in this." Henry knelt beside her, joints screaming, heart full. He lifted his eyes toward the broken ceiling, upward to the sky beyond. "We came here with nothing," he whispered, voice cracking. "Now you telling me there were folks 100, 200 years ago, saving for us?" His shoulders shook. Martha pressed her forehead to the floor. "Thank you," she sobbed. "Thank you for thinking of us before we even got here." Dr. Miles knelt too. The workers bowed their heads. The room fell into a deep, reverent silence, the kind that doesn't feel empty, the kind that feels full. Full of voices, full of prayers, full of past and present touching hands. And in that silence, New Hope hadn't just become a historic landmark. It had become a bridge across time, between those who had once escaped under its roof and those who had come there later, just trying to survive. The money in the box? Yes, they'd use it. Yes, it would bless them. But the real treasure was this. They were not alone. They were part of a story bigger than themselves, and they had been expected, waited for, loved forward, by people whose names they'd never know, but whose faith now lived under their feet, in their hands, and in the walls they were helping to heal. The day the scaffolding came down, people gathered like it was a holiday. Kids lined the sidewalk. Neighbors who once laughed now wore their best Sunday clothes. Cars slowed to a crawl just to stare. The tarps were gone, the broken beams replaced, the old brick cleaned and repaired. And there, standing tall at the top of the hill, like it had never doubted its own survival, was New Hope Missionary Church. Not a ruin, not a forgotten relic, a restored sanctuary. The stained glass, pieced back together from old fragments and newly crafted sections, glowed like jewels when the light hit them. Deep blues, fiery reds, golds that shimmered like the edges of sunlight against water. The once collapsed choir loft was rebuilt, reinforced, ready to hold voices again. The roof no longer sagged. The doors no longer creaked. The floors no longer threatened to swallow anyone whole. Yet for all the repairs, the building hadn't lost its soul. The original cross, carefully restored, now hung above the altar, polished, protected, reverently lit. You could still see the hand-carved details, the small imperfections that proved somebody's hands had shaped it with love. Henry and Martha stood outside on the day of the rededication, hands intertwined. Henry wore a suit he hadn't taken out in years, pressed as smooth as his old iron could manage. Martha wore a soft blue dress and a white shawl, her silver hair wrapped neatly, her eyes shining brighter than any stained glass. People milled around, taking pictures, hugging, talking. "Mr. Henry, Miss Martha, y'all look so sharp. Thank you for not giving up on this place." They smiled, greeted, hugged back. But every time the crowd shifted, Henry caught his breath a little when he saw the church. "Our church," he whispered to Martha. "Can you believe it?" She squeezed his hand. "God did this," she said softly. "We just walked in the door." The big rededication event was more than a church service. It was a full-blown community celebration. Inside, rows of polished pews filled with elders, families, students, city council members, reporters, preservationists, and children kicking their feet against the wood. There were banners that read, "New Hope Missionary Church, Historical Refuge, Living Sanctuary. Welcome home." Dr. Adrian Miles stood at the pulpit, not as a professor giving a lecture, but as a witness giving testimony. "Many of you know the basic story now," he began. "An elderly couple, down on their luck, buys an abandoned church for $250, hoping just to find a roof and a little peace." People chuckled softly. He smiled. "But what you may not fully understand is what that faith unlocked." He gestured around them. "This building existed before any of us," he said. "It sheltered families running for their lives. It held names we'll never know. It held songs of resistance and whispered prayers for freedom." He turned toward Henry and Martha, who sat at the front, hands clasped. "But those people," he continued, "also prayed for someone they would never meet, someone in the future who would come to restore what they started." He paused, letting his words sink in. That someone was Henry and Martha Caldwell. Applause flooded the sanctuary. People stood, cheered. Some shouted, "Amen," and "Hallelujah." Henry's cheeks flushed red. His eyes went shiny. Martha bowed her head, tears spilling quietly. When the clapping finally settled, Dr. Miles continued. "With the discovery of hidden letters, sacred artifacts, and the seal box beneath the floorboards, this church has now been officially recognized as a historic Freedom Refuge site and a cultural heritage landmark." The audience burst into applause again. He went on, "Today, we not only celebrate the restoration of a building, we honor the people whose faith made it possible." He motioned to the side. A city official stepped forward, holding a framed certificate. "Mr. and Mrs. Caldwell," she said into the microphone, "on behalf of the city, the Historical Preservation Council, and the Freedom Heritage Initiative, we recognize you as founding stewards of New Hope Historical Center and caretakers of the New Hope Chapel." Another wave of applause washed over them. Henry could barely stand when they motioned for him to come forward. His legs trembled, but Martha was on one side, and David, faithfully present, stepped up on the other side to help. Together, they made it to the front. The official handed them the framed certificate, her own eyes damp. "You turned your last dollars into a legacy," she whispered. "Thank you." Henry tried to speak, but his throat closed. Martha leaned toward the microphone. "We ain't special," she said softly, voice shaking. "We just trusted God with what little we had. He turned little into all of this." She gestured around. The church agreed with a thunder of applause. Later in the program, something happened few people expected. The former city inspector, the same one who mocked them, who pinned warnings to the door, who said no miracles fixing this, stepped slowly onto the platform. He looked smaller without the arrogance that once puffed him up. He took the microphone with unsteady hands. I asked to speak for a moment," he said, voice cracking. The room quieted. He cleared his throat. "My name is Daniel Reeves," he said. "I've been a city inspector for over 20 years. I've seen a lot of buildings. I've condemned a lot of structures. I believed I knew what was worth saving and what wasn't." He glanced at Henry and Martha. "When I first came to this site," he continued, "I saw a hazard, a lost cause. Two elderly people I believed were wasting their time and risking their lives." He swallowed, shame visible in every line of his face. "So I did what I always do. I quoted code. I issued warnings. I laughed at their faith." His voice dipped. Said no miracle was fixing this. Silence. He turned, facing the restored sanctuary, the glistening glass, the carved cross, the humming energy of history alive. "I was wrong," he said simply. The words hung heavy. "I misjudged this place," he said. "And worse, I misjudged the people in it." He looked at Henry and Martha again. "You two saw home where I saw rubble," he said. "You saw history where I saw trash. You saw God where I saw dust." His voice grew softer. "I came today not as an inspector," he said, "but as a man who needs to say he's sorry." He turned to them fully. "Mr. Caldwell, Mrs. Caldwell, I apologize for disrespecting you, for mocking your faith, for trying to push you out of the very home you were meant to have." Martha's eyes filled again, but her face softened. Henry swallowed hard. From the pew, someone whispered, "That's real right there." The inspector stepped back from the mic and, in front of everyone, offered his hand to Henry. Henry stared at it, then slowly. He reached out and shook it. No bitterness, just quiet grace. "Thank you," Henry said. "Takes a real man to stand up like that." The crowd exhaled as if they'd all been holding their breath. Some clapped, some wiped tears, some nodded, feeling something heavy in themselves loosen. The inspector stepped down, and in that moment, New Hope wasn't just a building redeemed, it was people too. Over the next weeks and months, the church was more than full, it was overflowing. Donations poured in, not just money, but furniture, books, equipment, volunteers. People wanted to be part of the story. New Hope became two things at once. A historical center, with displays of the artifacts they'd found. The original cross, selected letters from freedom seekers, the ledger of early church members, the sealed metal box, now in a protected case, the hymn books, carefully preserved, a working chapel and community sanctuary, weekly services that mix traditional hymns and contemporary songs, support groups for marginalized families, classes about history, resilience, and faith, meetings for community organizing. School buses started visiting on field trips. Tourists added it to their must-see lists. Church groups came from other states just to walk the aisles. Every tour ended the same way. Standing beneath the restored ceiling, and at the back of the room, more often than not, sat Henry and Martha, listening quietly, fingers intertwined. Still a little surprised the story was about them. Membership grew, but it wasn't just numbers. It was life. A teen choir formed, filling the once-collapsed loft with sound again. Bible study circles gathered in the evenings, some in English, some in Spanish, some just in silence and shared tears. On some nights, the old building felt like it physically hummed with the weight of all those stories coming together. Past and present, pain and healing, loss and restoration. One afternoon, after a long day of tours and meetings, Henry and Martha walked slowly up the front steps. Their steps, their church, their home. They had been given a small apartment in the back of the restored building. A simple but comfortable space connected to the main hall. A tiny kitchen, a worn but cozy couch, a bedroom with a sturdy bed and a window facing the sunrise. Their name was on the door, Caldwell Residence Church Stewards. Henry paused, fingers tracing the letters. "Never thought I'd see our name on something that wasn't a bill," he joked softly. Martha chuckled. "Look at God," she whispered. Inside, she set her Bible on the little table under the window. From their back door, they could open it and step straight into the sanctuary. Sometimes, late at night when the building was quiet, they'd walk into the main hall, sit in the front pew and just be. No cameras, no crowds, just them and the echoes of songs sung long ago. One night, as the moonlight streamed through colored glass and painted soft colors across the floor, Henry took Martha's hand. "You know something?" he said. "What's that?" she asked. "I came here just wanting a roof," he murmured. She smiled. "I came wanting purpose," she admitted. He nodded. "And we got both," he said. "Plus a whole lot more." She laid her head on his shoulder. "We got a home," she whispered. "Not just walls, a home." They sat there in the quiet glow. Two elders who'd been counted out by the world, now sitting in the front row of a story that would outlive them. Outside, the restored steeple shone against the night sky. Inside, their hearts finally rested. They had lost so much, but in the most unlikely place, a ruined church sold for $250, they had gained something worth more than any price. A legacy, a family of faith, a place where people would always be welcome, and every time someone new walked through those doors, they found not just history, but hope. Evening sunlight filtered through the restored stained glass windows, turning the sanctuary into a quiet rainbow. The colors danced across the worn wooden pews, brushing the altar steps, touching the old stone walls like a blessing renewed every sunset. Henry and Martha stood at the front of the church, not as guests, not as visitors, not as desperate elders searching for a place to lay their heads, but as caretakers of a story bigger than their own lives. The sanctuary was empty now, except for the whisper of the building settling. A soft groan here, a gentle sigh there, like the church itself breathed after 2 centuries of holding hope for weary souls. Martha knelt at the restored altar, fingers brushing the polished wood where the hand-carved cross hung above. The same cross once buried beneath rubble, now shining in warm gold light. Her Bible lay open in front of her. Henry knelt beside her, slower, careful with his knees, cane resting against the pew. Their prayers were never loud. They didn't need to be. Whispered words have a way of reaching heaven louder than shouting. A hush settled around them, the kind that feels alive. Then the voiceover began, not spoken aloud, but carried through memory, love, and the quiet truths that come when a story reaches its final chapter. We came here seeking, but found a miracle hidden beneath our feet. Martha lifted her head slightly, eyes resting on the stained glass glowing above them. Some folks spend their whole lives looking for treasure. The voice continued. Gold, money, things that shine only when the world says they matter. Henry looked toward the floor, where the sealed metal box had once rested, hidden for over 100 years. But the greatest treasures ain't always buried in wealth, a voice murmured. Sometimes they buried in broken places, places folks laugh at, places the world throws away, places with dust and cobwebs and memories too old for most people to care about. Martha reached for Henry's hand. He took it gently. And yet, the voice said, warm and full, if you got even a little faith, even just a mustard seed of it, you might find something greater than gold. The aisles stretch behind them. Sunlight spills across the floor. Colored beams dance over old hymn books now preserved. The church glows with new life, not because it is perfect, but because it was reborn. This old church waited 200 years for someone to come along and see what everyone else didn't. The camera imagines showing the old ledger, the carved cross, the letters rescued from the walls. Henry and Martha didn't come with money. They didn't come with power. They didn't even come with a plan. A soft chuckle touches the edges of the voice. They just came with hearts that refused to quit, and faith that refused to break. Henry lifted his eyes to the ceiling, not to admire the craftsmanship, but to silently thank the God who had guided them here. Martha whispered another quiet prayer, her fingers brushing the hem of the altar cloth. They thought they were just buying a roof. The voice continued smoothly. They thought they were buying a little peace, a beat of silence. But God gave them a home, not just for themselves, for the community, for the forgotten, for the memory of those who fled through the night, seeking freedom. Sometimes God plants blessings in broken places. The camera would pause on the cracks still left in the brick, intentionally preserved as part of history, waiting for someone with enough faith to uncover them. The camera then would rest on Henry's worn hands, on Martha's open Bible, on two elders who once believed their best days were behind them. But faith, the voice said gently, faith will make old bones stand again. Faith will make ruins rise again. Faith will turn last chance into new beginning. Henry grips his cane, pushing himself up carefully. Martha rises beside him, leaning lightly into his arm. They look around, taking in the sanctuary they helped resurrect. Quiet, holy, home. They bought a ruin for $250. The stained glass glows brighter, and gained a legacy worth more than any treasure. The couple walks slowly up the aisle, hand in hand. Their steps echo softly in the sanctuary, not lonely footsteps, but purposeful ones. Footsteps of people who found their calling late in life and stepped into it anyway. When the world counted them out, faith counted them in. When hope seemed lost, a miracle waited under the floorboards. And when two old souls thought life had passed them by, God whispered, "You're right on time." Henry opens the chapel door. Evening light pours in, golden and soft. Martha squeezes his hand as they walk out onto the steps together. Behind them, the restored church glows like a beacon, not just of history, but of hope.